everyone. So we're going to be talking about how to create an impact through your business to leave a legacy. As Kate said, my name is Fatima Khalid. I'm based here at Impact Brixton. I'm the founder of Social Impact Reporting, which is basically a one-man band consultancy at the moment, but decides to grow in the future. So basically, I mainly work on social impact measurement and reporting, so often helping corporates and charities to track and then report on their social impact goals, whatever that may be. So a lot of strategy work, as well as kind of data collection, putting it together, compiling a report, and then the actual publication of the report. But we're going to be talking a little bit more about kind of strategy, sustainability, impact, how it all ties in together. This is a rough plan of what we're going to be talking about today. So starting off with kind of defining purpose-driven business, what's the point, why is it important? We're going to go into a bit of terminology, because that's one thing that is actually quite tricky when it comes to purpose, social impact, sustainability. There's a lot of words out there, so we're going to talk through a few of them. And I've tried to make it a little bit practical in terms of a few kind of tips of how, if you were to start along your sustainability or social impact journey, what can that look like? How can you start? And we'll have a little bit of a time for a break. And then we are going to spend quite a bit of time talking about social impact strategy and specifically a tool that I use called Theory of Change. So I'm going to try to walk you through that, and hopefully you'll come away with an idea of how to apply that to your own organizations. And then finally, I'm going to touch a little bit on measurement and reporting. So how do you take the theory, turn that into real data, and then how do you present that in a way that your stakeholders will care about? So a lot of this is focused on small businesses, but a lot of it will also apply to charities and nonprofits as well. But the way that I've kind of framed it is around small business owners. So I wanted to start with a little bit of kind of setting the scene, a little bit of context. It's got a few statistics here. So here you can see when a company leads with purpose, respondents were 78% more likely to want to work for that company. So it makes you more appealing to potential employees and current employees, as well as to consumers. 57% of consumers would pay more for eco-friendly products. This was actually taken in 2019, and it's gone up from 49% in 2011. So it's showing kind of a trend in consumers actually being willing to put their money where their mouth is when it comes to sustainability. 77% of consumers are more likely to purchase from companies committed to making the world a better place. This is also the case post-pandemic, with 64% of young Brits saying they're more likely to buy from brands with a social goal since the pandemic began. The new normal is more about shopping better, not more. So what does it mean to be a purpose-driven business? This includes social enterprises and community interest companies. Social enterprises are businesses that are changing the world for the better. Like traditional businesses, they aim to make a profit, but it's what they do with their profits that sets them apart, reinvesting or donating them to create positive social change. A purpose-driven model allows businesses to go beyond selling products and make a difference through their decisions and strategies, or through their support of social and environmental programs. Here we can see that purpose includes both internal decision-making and business practices, as well as supporting external social impact projects. Internal purpose strategy includes having sustainable supply chains, inclusive hiring practices, and making products and services that are accessible, environmentally friendly, and fit for purpose. External purpose strategy could include community volunteering, donating company profits, or supporting environmental causes. There are a few key terms that you'll recognize that also broadly relate to these concepts. So one is CSR, or corporate social responsibility. That's a little bit more traditional, and it's typically more to do with external purpose. So that was often used by bigger corporates, and it's talking more about what their employees do in the community or the kind of funds that they direct externally. Another term that's come up a lot more recently is ESG, which stands for Environmental, Social and Governance. A few of you will have had Zoe talking about it a couple of weeks ago. And that's more focused on internal purpose. Again, these terms are often used by larger corporations, but that is more focusing on how you operate as a business, more looking inwardly. So the environmental is about how sustainable are your operations. The social is about how are you dealing with your internal labor practices and hiring, inclusive hiring, things like that. And governance is about how are your decision making structured in place, and how kind of democratic are things run. So you will have heard, as I said, lots of different terms being thrown about, and here I want to focus on two main ones, which I think are the core of being a purpose-driven business: sustainability and social impact. Sustainability focuses on mitigating the negative effects of human consumption and production on the environment. This could be through limiting greenhouse gas emissions, reducing water use, or limiting plastic consumption. In other words, minimizing your environmental footprint. In contrast, social impact focuses on the good that we can create in the world. This could be through financial inclusion, improved education, promoting biodiversity, or the preservation of cultural heritage. So social impact can be seen as maximizing your handprint. In essence, this means creating the most social good possible through your organization. There is, of course, some fluidity here, with parts of sustainability blending into social impact and vice versa, but it's a good way of kind of initially conceptualizing how you can generate good through your business. The triple bottom line is a concept that allows businesses to consider business success beyond just their profit. The triple bottom line also includes environmental and social responsibility targets. Alongside the traditional bottom line of profits, here you can see that there's also a commitment to people, which is the social impact goal, and the planet, which is the environmental goal. With this framework in mind, you can develop a sustainable business strategy that's also profitable. Incorporating these goals into your business priorities can guide action to maximize both purpose and profit. So for a business owner, you could set annual targets against all three criteria to track performance against metrics that go beyond the financial. That can help you to keep your business accountable and guide decision-making to serve social and environmental targets as well as financial targets. So it's more about like changing the incentives so that you have purpose at the core of your targets as well as profit. How can small businesses practice sustainability in their day-to-day operations? Here are a few points for you to consider to get started. Firstly, minimizing or offsetting your greenhouse gas emissions. There are numerous ways to calculate your personal or business carbon footprint. The easiest way is to use an online calculator. This can help you to estimate your annual greenhouse gas emissions. It's a good start to reducing your emissions because it can help you to understand where most of your emissions come from, potentially highlighting activities that you could cut down on. And secondly, estimating your carbon footprint can help you to offset your emissions by donating to an environmental cause. So here, the idea is to donate funds to plant a tree, for example, so the carbon dioxide that's been emitted through your business will then be reabsorbed over time. That's something we'll talk about in a sec. The second point is about limiting waste or excessive consumption. So trying to kind of look at what you're purchasing, how you're operating, where can you kind of reduce perhaps water use, or if you're buying a little bit more than you need, using processes like just-in-time ordering to be more proactive in how you consume as a business. Recycling the waste, so if you don't have waste management processes in place, a lot of it's quite straightforward, but when it comes to practice, it can be a little bit harder to implement. Focusing on procuring environmentally conscious supplies. So depending on what your business is and the kind of materials that you're working with, whether you can source like recycled materials, like for your office or for the product that you create, thinking about where the energy is coming from that you use, just thinking about for the different types of resources that you use, where are they coming from and what are the sources. And also, finally, using local suppliers and partners to kind of reduce emissions on transport and haulage, things like that. And that, of course, also has a social element to it too, if you're like fostering community in your local environment. The key, I think, for all of these, especially for small businesses, is to just start keeping an eye on what your consumption is for different things. It might not be much, especially against some of these different elements, but if you have an idea of where you're starting, it can help you to figure out how to get the quick wins, and then also as you scale, how to do that more efficiently from a sustainability angle as well as a social impact angle. So obviously as you grow, your consumption will increase, but it's just thinking about doing that in a conscious way. So this is an example of a carbon calculator that I just really like and is very close to my heart. This is an organization called Carbon Ethics. They were basically started about 3 years ago. They were part of a charity that I used to work for called One Young World, and they were basically like 3 young professionals who got together and they kind of created a carbon offsetting scheme in Jakarta in Indonesia. and it's about sequestering blue carbon. So carbon sources that are related to the sea and the coastline. Here is just a little visual of mangroves and what mangroves are and how they basically support the environment in a bunch of ways. One is sequestering CO2, one is supporting the local wildlife, local farmers, and also guarding against coastal erosion. And what this specific organization does is they have a carbon calculator on their website, so you can basically tell them what you do either personally or through your business. It will calculate what your emissions are, and then it will recommend an amount for you to donate to them, and then they will then give this money to people to preserve the mangroves in the Jakarta coastline. And there's loads of organizations like this that exist. This is just one, like I do pro bono work for these guys and I just really like how they operate, but there's loads and loads. You can have a look online if that was something you were interested in. It's kind of a one-stop shop. You can just put in what you do and pay for it all in one go, and it's one kind of quick win that you can do for sustainability. So I know we've got a bit of a range of organisations here and people here, but what I would like to do is just have a really quick think about which sustainability practices could you start to embed in your business, or do you already? I'll go back to the list, but from these things, a lot of them are quite obvious, but is there something that you perhaps haven't considered as much, or something that could be relevant to you that you could perhaps put a bit more thought into? So you can just take a few minutes. Feel free to discuss in your tables or just work by yourself if you feel like it. But yeah, I'll give you 5 minutes for that. Okay, would anyone like to just share what they discussed in their tables? Anything that they think they could implement, maybe something that they don't think is relevant to them, or any questions that anyone has? Yeah?
It's very difficult recycling waste with me. Oh, bless you. Just for the
Yes, apologies. Kate has a mic.
Recycling waste for me, I mean, sorry. Okay. I try to recycle things like cardboard boxes and stuff like that I have deliveries in. Plastics are a bit more difficult, but mostly because we have dresses and suits and stuff like this, and most of those are covered or encased in plastic. And it's very difficult because a lot of them are white and cream. They have to be covered. So I am waiting for the powers that be to come up with something wonderful other than the plastic to keep them protected and covered from dust and finger marks and everything else. So how do I get around something like that?
Yeah, that is a tough one when it's from your suppliers. I think, I mean, you need to, like with all of this stuff, you need to be practical as well in terms of where you are. And you've got a children's clothing business, is that right?
Yeah.
Okay. So I think that could potentially be more of like a long-term goal in terms of like working with your supplier to see if there's maybe like an alternative like green plastic wrapping that they could use. I'm not like skilled in like clothing, so I don't know how that would work, or if that would work, or if there's something already available, if there's like maybe like a paper alternative that could work.
Well, they'd have to think about the fabrics of the clothing as well, because certain types of clothing are going to absorb from something like tissue paper. You've got to use that to keep the light off of delicate fabrics like silk and so on. So how are we going to get over that for clothing?
Of course, yeah, and I think there is kind of like a priority a line there. So it's like where you kind of have to continue consuming something for now. It's like, how can you then responsibly try to dispose of that in a way that makes sense? And then working backwards to see how far you can get through, maybe start speaking to like other suppliers that are a bit more conscious in terms of how they package, or just speaking to your current suppliers to see if they have anything in the works, because that just starting that conversation off often will lead to a sea change, especially more recently when more and more consumers put pressure on suppliers. It can contribute to them then reviewing.
And is all of this compulsory rather than? Is it compulsory? Is it obligatory? Is it? What is it?
I mean, I don't know if I'd say it's compulsory, but it's just as if you want to be, a sustainable business or a purpose-driven business, it's definitely part of putting your money where your mouth is. Of course, you do need to be like, I'm very much someone who like walks the middle line in terms of balancing practicality with the kind of the the best case scenario, because you still need to meet yourself where you are while striving to improve as you go. And obviously you've been in business for a long time, so there's going to be a lot of things
we've
that are
done what
already.
we can. We have recyclable bags. You know, we've changed from plastic to paper. Customers are not happy. It's raining out there. I've just sold them a pair of trousers, and they've got to put it in a bag that is paper to walk home and put on their kid with fiddle, you know. Yeah. So I've got to keep plastics as well as, because I can't, you know, it's very unfair to expect people to walk about with clothing, you know, in paper bags.
No, I do understand that point, and I think like once we get to a point where the alternatives that we have are better able to deal with those things, and hopefully that won't be a problem, and you can just stock that one thing that is more sustainable. But yeah, I mean, taking baby steps in the right direction is still progress. So.
I don't know, but I think it's very rude, so I don't.
That term B is supposed to go somewhere else.
It is, yeah. So,
It's supposed to give that.
yes, it's HMRC.
Anyone else like to share any thoughts?
We had a very brief discussion about people, us, and us making sure that we're sustainable and the work that we're doing is sustainable, and mental health, well-being, burnout, and how we can embed that into the work that we do as well.
Oh, okay. Yeah, nice. Definitely broader look at sustainability beyond the environmental. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, we'll touch on that a little bit more.
One thing that I read
Please.
that Heineken did, Heineken created a bottle of beer that could also be used as a brick to build houses.
Okay.
After that was a really good campaign, and I'm thinking somehow to do that, because I'm a musician, so we make a lot of vinyls and merch, to kind of like, what's their life after they're dead? Are they going to decompose in 150 years, so we can somehow make something out of them? Just an idea I wanted to share. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, there's definitely much more innovative solutions coming out now. There's a lot of research happening now to see what can be possible. But yeah, unfortunately, we're not so much in a place where everything is the best that it can be. But I do think we're seeing progress in the way that it should be. But yeah, sounds like a really interesting idea. Okay, so I wanted to talk a little bit about how to get started. So you spoke a bit about what you potentially could do in the places that you are now, and this is kind of like my starter for 10 for if you were to think about embedding some new strategies, how could you do that? And I think starting off by identifying the areas of consumption and your current suppliers, so whatever that may be, it's obviously going to be relevant for who you are and what you do, but whether that's like through energy, food, production materials, office supplies, just trying to figure out what the things are that you do consume as a business from like a production point of view, and having a record of that's like a really good starting point, because then at least you know where you stand, and then tracking it. So once you have your sources, if you're able to track it, ideally quarterly, that's not always possible, but if you're able to keep an eye on it, then you can see how it changes over time. And then from that, once you have that information to hand, it's then a lot easier to identify areas to reduce consumption or switch to sustainable suppliers. And I've put by priority here because, as I said, you know, you're not going to build Rome in a day necessarily, especially if you're like an established business. But it's more about just thinking about what are the quick wins, what's more practical, what's more possible for right now, what's not going to, you know, stretch my budget too much. And then maybe something else that I've identified could be a future goal, and just try to be realistic in your approach is what I would recommend. And then, yeah, creating an action plan to implement those changes. So thinking about when and how you can add those new elements into how you operate. And then finally, execution and continually tracking progress. And I think if you do regular tracking, that can be really helpful for your own internal analysis as well as external reporting, if that was something that you wanted to do, just to kind of show how your business has changed its approach over time. It's definitely something that consumers are demanding a lot more now. Okay. So wanted to talk about purpose a little bit more broadly. So as I've mentioned, purpose as encompassing both sustainability and social impact. We focused a bit on sustainability so far, but we're going to go more into social impact shortly. So purpose is not a zero-sum game. As we've seen with the quotes at the beginning of this presentation, profit and purpose are not always in opposition. You don't have to compromise on profits because your startup's business purpose reflects social responsibility. Creating shared value for all stakeholders can enhance a company's competitiveness. According to Deloitte, purpose-driven companies witness higher market share gains and grow 3 times faster on average than their competitors, all while achieving higher workforce and customer satisfaction. Embedding purpose from the start is much more meaningful for your stakeholders because they can see that you're kind of walking the walk from the get-go, and it's also more genuine for them to kind of see your progression. So even if you have a particular articulated purpose and that develops over time, it's still able to see how you kind of grew as your business grew from a purpose perspective. Purpose can be a really key differentiator against your competitors, being a reason why your consumers purchase from you instead of from other people in your market. So that can definitely help you to get a competitive edge. Purpose can evolve with growth, as I mentioned. So if you have a small business, the purpose that you start out with might not necessarily be exactly the same, and that's fine and that makes sense. As you grow, your priorities might change. It could be if new or different social needs arise, or if the nature of your business slightly changes. But by defining your purpose and tracking your impact metrics now, it will give you a strong foundation for reporting and to iteratively improve and tweak your business purpose over time. The important thing is to have a good idea of what success looks like for your impact goal, and then that can help you to define your purpose and find the data to demonstrate impact. Yeah, so I'm all about measurements. I'm a data geek, and I just think that having the more data as you can help you to be in a better place of understanding where you are and to make sure you're making the decisions that make sense for where you are and for the restrictions that you have. So typically businesses will have a driving factor behind their business that will guide both their internal and external purpose priorities. Your purpose will be unique to you and your business. It could be to share knowledge, to improve quality of life, foster community, improve relationships or representation, anything that works for you. But it does need to have a social element and not just a business one. The first step to defining your business purpose is articulating your social impact goal or goals. Your business social impact goal will be tailored to you. Basically, you need to think about the question, what kind of social benefit do you want to generate through your business? This could be about generating positive change through the operations of the organization itself or through providing external support. Your business purpose can be informed by your personal principles, the community you serve, or by your employees. A lot of businesses do have some kind of implicit purpose, but they often struggle to articulate it. Your business ambition can be broad in scope, such as increasing disability representation in the British media, or it could be narrower, like decreasing unemployment for Brixton locals. You can have multiple impact goals for your business if your passion lies in different areas. The key is that no matter how ambitious the goal, your business or organization should be able to contribute towards that goal in some way. A really helpful tool to help define your business purpose is the theory of change. The theory of change is a framework that allows you to look at a specific social impact goal and uncover the steps that it takes to create a long-lasting impact. This is really helpful because it can help you to identify the parts of the impact pathway that are the most relevant to you and help you to understand what those outcomes can look like in real-world data. The process can then help you to better articulate your vision in a way that makes sense to your internal and external stakeholders. And this is something we're going to talk about in a lot of detail shortly. But before that, I do want you to have a little think about how you would define your own impact goal. So if you were to have a mission, a statement that you want to kind of push forward through your business, how would you try to articulate that? Feel free to discuss in your tables or just work independently, write it down. I'll give you 5 minutes. Okay, let's finish up our conversations, guys. Perfect. Would anyone be willing to share their impact goal for their business? Do we have any volunteers? Yeah? Jacqueline?
Hi everyone. My impact goal for my business, which is handmade natural skincare remedies, is good health and well-being, which is basically also a part of my purpose for my business. Good health, as in just looking after yourself, using natural products as much as possible, and well-being, the umbrella of a healthy lifestyle. Okay.
So from like a self-care perspective, is that kind of what you mean? Like well-being, like through self-care?
Yeah, through self-care, generally, and just trying to live more natural, using plants and, you know, what we have around us, and less of the conventional, less of the...
Okay, excellent. That makes a lot of sense. Anyone else would like to share? Yeah?
Thank you. I guess my impact goal is to get more creatives of colour into the creative industry from a younger age, so that in 30, 40, 50 years' time, you're seeing a more diverse team in companies. Yeah, basically that's what I'm hoping for. So start from the beginning, and hopefully that will travel all the way up. It will take years. We know it will take years, but that's the ultimate goal.
Okay, so to increase diversity in the creative
industries, yeah.
Okay, excellent. Great. Thank you very much. Any final takers? I think we're good. There's some really good conversations happening there. So I do love this question for that, because it really makes you like interrogate yourself and what you want to achieve. Okay, so we've spoken a bit about purpose, we've spoken a bit about what your impact goals are. So why bother measuring social impact in the first place? In my experience, there are two main reasons that organizations choose to measure their social impact. The first reason is to maximize impact by improving service delivery. This is where the theory of change analysis really comes in handy. Understanding your impact goals and then setting in place indicators to help you understand whether those goals are being achieved on the ground can help you to identify areas of weakness in your project, allowing you to iteratively change your approach. Continuous analysis is important because it can help to flag failings resulting from external factors as well as internal issues. For example, if we were to take that example of a project trying to get people into employment in Brixton to tackle high unemployment levels, something like COVID-19 could have drastically reduced the effectiveness of that intervention, which may require a pivot of approach, even if that same project had been running successfully in previous years. Impact measurement can help you to understand the tangible outcomes of your activities. As we're all aware, good intentions may not always translate into actual tangible impact. Measuring impact helps us to think about whether a project is useful, sustainable, and beneficial to the wider community. It can help identify gaps and think of ways to increase impact. This is often referred to as the prove and improve approach. Prove that the intended impact is occurring while gathering data to improve your offer. The second reason why organizations choose to invest in impact measurement is to communicate their impact to stakeholders in a concise and meaningful way. This is typically for funders, partner organizations, or other stakeholders for accountability and to evidence their outcomes. Additionally, it can be important to communicate your impact to your service users or customers to ensure that they understand the social benefits of your program. Of course, impact measurement can be used for both reasons, and it often is. The main difference is that for external communication, your impact needs to be concise and easy to understand, but by its very nature, social impact measurement is complex and nuanced, and much of this can be lost when reporting externally, since for external reporting, simplicity is the key. So it's about kind of getting that balance of what's helpful for you in your decision making, and also communicating it to the people that you need to communicate to. So we're going to take a little break. Okay, so moving on. I've mentioned this a lot, so I'm going to talk a little bit about the theory of change, how to use it, and what it actually is. So this is basically like a little map of what a theory of change canvas looks like. A couple of you in the room will be familiar with it. So I will talk about this in more detail and break it down, because there's lots of like sections here. But the idea is to like define your problem, figure out who your kind of like stakeholders are that you want to affect and who are the other people involved. Then from the activity, work through the output and the different outcome levels to then get to your end goal impact. And I'll talk through that in a little bit more detail. So we're going to just go through some of the concepts in a bit more detail first. So starting off with an output is a direct result of an activity. So for example, let's consider the project that I referenced before that aims to decrease unemployment in Brixton by providing skills training to young people. So the output of a project like that would be the number of young people who are part of the project. So it doesn't necessarily mean that anything's happened, it just means that's how many people were there. An outcome is the substantive change resulting from the intervention. So in this example, if there are these young people in the room and they're learning about employability skills, then it would be an increase in skills and knowledge or understanding of the job market or some kind of like change in their understanding and skills. The impact is the long-term change resulting from the intervention. So in this example, it would be increased employment in Brixton. And an indicator is a data point used to track the change in an output, an outcome, or an impact. So it can be applied across all three of those. And it's basically how do you figure out whether that thing has happened or not. So an indicator for the output would be, again, the number of participants in a room, and an indicator for the impact would be how many participants of that program are in full-time employment 3 months after the program ended. So we're going to put that in context a little bit. This is like a simplified theory of change. So you start off with defining what your problem is, what's the thing that you're trying to achieve, and then from that, you go all the way to the end, and you're like, okay, so what's the end goal impact that I'm trying to get to? If my problem is high unemployment in Brixton, the impact is I want more young people in jobs in Brixton. And then you kind of work through the rest of this to get to that impact. So stakeholders are the people that are affected. It can be more than one group. Typically, it's the people that you want to benefit through your program, but there could be additional stakeholders as well, such as your program funders, your customers, if they're not your beneficiaries, whoever is affected basically by your program. The activity or the intervention, that's the thing that you do. So the thing that's within your control, the thing that you put on, the product that you sell, whatever your intervention is the activity. The output is the direct result of the activity. So how many units have you sold? How many people did you reach through that event? That kind of thing. And then the outcome is like what's happened as a result of that, which then contributes to the broader impact. I will illustrate this with an example shortly, but just to go into a bit more detail for outcomes, you can break outcomes down into different levels because this is kind of like the bit that we care about the most. So first level outcomes are basically a change in capacity. So that means a change in understanding, awareness, or knowledge. So that's kind of the most base level change. Like once you know that someone is in a room at the output level, the first outcome level is to have a change in knowledge and understanding. Beyond that, we get to second level outcomes, which is about a change in behavior. So, is my mic issue? It's fine? Okay. So change in behavior. So from your knowledge and understanding, the second level is to have that actually inform what you do, how you approach your job search or whatever it is. So it's actually like putting that knowledge and understanding into action in some way. The third level outcome or the impact is then a change in status or condition. So that is the actual longer term, more tangible change that results from these different outcome levels. So in the same example, it would be getting a job when I was previously unemployed. And I didn't say, but like these sections are in pink because they are the most impactful. Like once we get beyond the output level, we're looking at outcomes and impact. They're much more meaningful for what we're actually trying to achieve, but they're also a little bit beyond our control. So like once we get past the output level, all the stuff on this side are things that we have direct control over, like we're putting the intervention on and we have some control over like how many people attend or how many products are sold, etc. Once it gets to the first level outcome, then it's a little bit harder to make sure that that happens. So I will illustrate that in an example shortly. But yeah, that's kind of why these boxes are in pink, because the further away that you get from the intervention, the harder it is to have control over that outcome level and then to be able to actually claim that impact. So below all of these different types, from the activities, the outputs, and the different levels of outcome, you can have indicators to track to what extent those things have happened. And we also have assumptions for each of these. So the assumptions will basically tell us what are the things that we think are true between the activity and the output for the output to happen. So this is like the thing that we think is needed for the output to actually occur, and the same thing for each of these stages too. I will illustrate this with an example so that it makes a little bit more sense. The example we're going to use is this masterclass series, because you're all here, you know what it is, and hopefully it's going to be very impactful. So we're going to talk through that for the theory of change. So starting off with the problem. The problem, as defined by IB, is that local businesses are struggling to adapt through the pandemic. So the pandemic obviously hit a lot of businesses quite hard, and it was difficult for some of them to bounce back. And IB wanted to do something to help, with the end goal of having businesses become more successful and resilient to external shocks. So this is the end impact that we're hoping to generate through this program. So starting off with stakeholders, the intended beneficiaries are businesses and business owners in Lambeth. And the activity, as you all know, are having a select number of expert masterclasses on key business skills. The output then is how many business owners attend those masterclasses. How many people do we have in the room? How many people sign up? How many people watch online? That would be the output of this particular intervention. The first level outcome, the change in capacity, is about what you learn. So here it would be about business owners learning relevant skills to improve operations and resilience. And then beyond the learnings and going into implementation, second level outcomes would be that business owners embed their learnings into their business operations. So the assumption, we'll go into the assumptions, but the assumption is that if their learnings were relevant enough, they will then choose to action that into how they run their businesses. And then this will lead to the end goal impact. Once you embed those learnings, your business will ideally become more successful and more resilient. So we're going to add some indicators and some assumptions onto these just to see how we would track this in real life and how we are tracking this in real life. So starting with the assumptions, these are, as I said, the conditions that we need for the next stage of the theory of change to be true. So if we start off here between activities and outputs, apologies, this is really small if you can't actually see it, but you will get these slides afterwards. So the assumption between up to the output, that local business owners attend the masterclasses, is that business owners are interested in the content that IB puts on and they're available to learn, so they are able to actually attend. The second assumption for the first level outcome to be true, where business owners learn something, is that the masterclass content is relevant and useful, so business owners are able to actually take something away from it. The second level outcome is that business owners embed their learnings into their business operations. The assumption there is that business owners see value in taking the time to implement their learnings. Because if you come here and you learn something and you're like, that was nice, but I'm not going to do much with it, then we kind of stop here. We don't move on to the second level outcomes. That's what we're assuming is true for this to happen. And then the assumption between the second level outcome and the third level outcome, or the impact, is that these learnings, when implemented, support everyday business function and resilience. And that's how we get to the end level impact. Does that make sense? Sweet. Okay, so looking at the indicators now, and this is basically how do we now prove any of this? And like, how do we see to what extent any of this stuff happened? So you can start with indicators from the activity level. So this is, yeah, again, like how many people are in the room. So the indicators here are the number and the duration of the masterclasses. That's just like, sorry, not how many people are in the room. This is what actually happened. What did Impact Brixton put on? The output indicators are then how many people were in the room. So the number of participants in each masterclass. That could be online and in person, and also the location of businesses, because as we said before, we care about businesses in Lambeth, so we want to know how many of the businesses here are Lambeth-based. For the first level outcomes, what we could use as indicators are how many participants reported an increase in knowledge as a result of attending a specific masterclass. So that could be a question that we ask like in a survey afterwards, and I believe Kate set that up to say, okay, you attended this masterclass, do you feel like you have a bit of a better understanding about it? And another indicator could be the types of skills learned. So that's more of a qualitative indicator as opposed to a quantitative one. We're talking more about what do you feel like you gained through that particular masterclass. The second level outcomes, talking about business owners embedding learnings into their business operations. Here, some indicators could be the number of participants reporting, implementing the learnings into their business, so how many respondents actually said that they did that. And another one could be the nature of the learnings implemented. So maybe if like some of the masterclasses are more useful than others, this could tell us which learnings did people actually go back and apply to their businesses, and how did they take the learnings that they got from the masterclasses and actually turn them into something that was useful to them. And for the third level outcome, businesses becoming more successful and resilient to external shocks. This, of course, is dependent on a lot of factors beyond Impact Brixton and this particular program. But a couple of indicators that can just show us a bit of a sense check of what the general trend was over that time. The first one is a percentage change in business owner confidence. So if at the beginning of the whole IB Thrive program, we were to ask everyone, how confident do you feel in your business surviving the next 12 months? And then we were to then ask that same question at the end of this program, we could use that percentage change as an indicator to see to what extent this is true. Obviously, we know there's external factors that affect that, but it can help to show some extent of the impact that the IB Thrive program could have had. And another indicator here is percentage change in revenue. Of course, again, this isn't going to have, we can't claim all of that like through this program, but it'd be great if we could. But this is a good indicator to see to what extent our business is becoming more resilient and more successful after having attended this masterclass series. So what's the point of using the theory of change? What are the benefits? So it's really helpful to define your journey to impact, I think, as we've just seen. There's a lot of stages and assumptions that go into a particular impact goal. So being able to define that and kind of delineate all the different steps can really force you to interrogate your own assumptions. It can force you to be just a lot more explicit with what you're trying to achieve and what you want to see in terms of real life data as well. Specifying your assumptions, so forcing you to think about what are the things that I'm just assuming to be true for this to make sequential sense and for the impact pathway to be achieved in the real life. It's helpful to make sure that your project is addressing the problem at hand. So if your problem is, reducing homelessness in a specific area, but then going through this process, you realize that your intervention is actually not contributing to that. It's instead contributing to something a little bit different. This can help you to kind of identify where those gaps are and then figure out what perhaps a better intervention would be, which relates to the next point about enabling iterative improvement and testing your assumptions. So doing the whole theory of change for a specific project, it can help you to figure out what your assumptions are, and then you can use that as like a drawing board that you can come back to, change as you go along, and kind of work out the level that suits you and your impact goals. It's really, really helpful for this. So for the measurement point, finding relevant and meaningful indicators at different outcome levels. Because with the end goal outcome, like for this particular program, we know that we want business owners to be more resilient and successful. But if we were to just track that, we'd be really lacking in proving the impact of this particular program. So to then specify all the intermediary stages and then have indicators at each level shows how progress is being made and how impact is being achieved through this program specifically at different levels. And that just really helps you to measure your impact and to iterate it and improve it as you go along. So getting started with measuring your impact. I'm realizing that I've written this list assuming that you already have your theory of change. So do a theory of change first, because it's really helpful. Ideally with someone that you can bounce ideas off of, because it's really hard to do by yourself. Or even like do it and then like give a pass to someone else that they can give a little bit of feedback. But once you have your theory of change, using it to identify your key indicators, You can pull loads of different indicators out. You don't need to track all of them. It can also be this is kind of where I want to start, and then this is where I'd like to go in the future, like when I have a bit more time and resources. And then create an indicator list, including the source of data, type of data, time frame for collection, what your baseline data could be, and things like that, just to kind of help you plan that. So baseline data is what you use as a comparison. So that could be how you yourself were performing in a previous time period. It could be how a comparable company is doing in that space. But it's basically like having a data point that's comparable to what you're trying to achieve. So once you have a list of indicators, then you can look at making a data collection strategy. So figuring out which indicators are the most relevant for you, which ones may be out of scope, which ones you might want to revisit later. Then making your data collection tool. So if that's a survey, writing out the survey, like doing that boring stuff basically. And then finally, just the practicalities of making a timeline and assigning responsibilities, because if you don't have a plan, you're just not going to do it. These are always the things that kind of get left behind, but once you have that data, it can be really, really valuable to tracking your purpose and also communicating that to people who can give you money. So it's really good. This is an example of an indicator list. It's a little bit daunting, but don't be concerned. So I've basically pulled some indicators from that like fictional project that I mentioned before about improving employability in Brixton. So if we look at the top line here, the first indicator is the percentage of participants in full-time employment after 6 months. The source of that data would be through a feedback survey. So we'd ask the participants 6 months later whether they are in a job or not. The type of data is quantitative because it's numerical. The time frame for collection is 6 months after the intervention, because that's what we're asking them. And the baseline data that we're using, so that's basically the data point for comparison, is local unemployment rates. And also, if we have similar data for similar interventions, what could that look like? So if there was a similar program in the previous year that did, that helped young people in Brixton or another borough to get into jobs, what were their success rates after 6 months? And that could be a good kind of tool for comparison. And I've also got a column here for the question asked. So here I've got, are you currently in employment, full-time, part-time, other? No. And it's only asking about currently because we know that we're asking the question 6 months later. So whatever this response is in that time frame, it will give us the answer to that indicator, which is percentage of participants in full-time employment after 6 months. And there's other examples here. You will have a copy of the slide that you can go through in your own time. But yeah, it's basically just trying to figure out, if I was to get that information, where do I need to get it from? What do I need to figure out? And how do I ask that question and to who, basically? Okay, so these are kind of just a few rough and ready ideas for what a small business could do practically to try to start along its purpose or social impact journey. Of course, this is not an exhaustive list, as with the sustainability list too, but just trying to kind of throw a few ideas out there of what is accessible and doable for a business without a huge amount of resources. Starting off with donating time, it is free. So that could be through employee volunteering or pro bono consulting, which is something that I do. And it's just a really good way to share skills or support organizations using your time instead of specific funds. Another point is obviously donating funds to aligned causes. That's more of kind of an external purpose point, but that can definitely show that you are purpose driven as a business. You could also donate in kind if that was something you had access to. Donating products, donating office space, time is another in-kind donation, but like if there was something else that you could offer to an organization that was aligned to your purpose, that could be something to consider. Another way of being socially impactful is conscious hiring and sourcing. So we kind of already referred to sourcing of materials from a sustainability perspective, but also thinking of sourcing from maybe a D&I perspective or from kind of like a local perspective. So thinking more carefully about who is on your team, who you outsource specific tasks to, and where you get your materials from a social impact lens. And also as a point here, I've got developing socially responsible products and services. So perhaps you could add a line to your existing product range that is more specifically targeted to being responsible because sometimes those things can, cost a little bit more. They can take a little bit more time to produce. So it's maybe not so much a case of pivoting your whole business, but it's more adding something to your existing range so that you're working your way into this world. Okay, so talking about reporting a little bit more, which is more my bread and butter. So tracking your sustainability and social impact progress is important for internal use as well as external reporting. So we spoke about if you are able to track your social impact, it can help to guide your own decision making, and it can help you to make sure that your impact is being generated in a way that suits you and suits your purpose. And also that can then guide how you convey your purpose to your consumers, to your funders, to your business partners, whoever it may be relevant to. But just starting off tracking is really good for comparability and being able to have a place to start from. External reporting can add credibility for customers, investors, and other key stakeholders. So even if it's like something as small as like a social post every now and then, or like a little section on your website that just says like these are the things we're conscious about and this is what we're doing so far, that can be a really good place to start. And it can show that you are doing something towards sustainability and social impact and that you do have something to prove for it. There are a lot of different reporting frameworks that exist when it comes to reporting your social impact. It's a relatively new field in terms of how it exists today. It's only been around for like 10, 15 years. The previous methods were much more kind of international development focused, but there hasn't really become a single framework that is the one tool that everybody uses. So there's quite a lot of different approaches that people can use. And the one consistent thing that I would say is like if you use that theory of change framework, that can then help you to just figure out what reporting methods are the most appropriate. And if you do report and collect and report on your data, then that can really help you to iteratively improve your data collection and your reporting as you grow over time. So if you start off measuring something or tracking a specific indicator, but then you find it's actually not so relevant, over time you can figure out something that actually suits you a little bit more, and that can then give you data that's really helpful to take back to where it's relevant. So there are a couple of frameworks that exist that are relevant. This is one that a lot of you are probably familiar with, the UN Sustainable Development Goals. This is a list of 17 goals that were agreed by the UN nation states about 10 years ago, and it's basically covering a huge range of different social impact goals. These are at the state level, but for inspiration of what kind of social impact goals you could strive towards, this is quite a good place to start. It's also possibly one of the most universally recognized frameworks that exist when it comes to social impact. So if you did want to report in line with the SDGs, people would probably know what it is, more so than any other framework that exists, at least anyway. And it is fairly extensive in terms of the things that it covers. So like the first three, talking about zero poverty, zero hunger, good health and well-being, so like kind of basic human needs. Quality education, goals 5 and 10 are talking about equality. 6 is about clean water and sanitation. 7 is about clean energy. Then it moves on to like decent work, industry and infrastructure. Over here we've got sustainable cities and communities and responsible consumption. Then we've got 13, 14 and 15, which are more sustainability focused, talking about the environment, life below water and life on land. 16 is more about peace, justice and strong institutions, so like anti-human trafficking, human rights, those kind of things. And 17 is just partnerships, so making sure that countries get together to actually achieve these. I've linked to the website here, and it is quite interesting because there's a really long list of indicators and targets against each goal. So if you are a data geek, you can go and have a look and see what they have. It is at the nation level, but it's very interesting to have a look at, and you can like apply them to your own businesses, which is what I'm going to ask you to think about now. If you had to pick, like which SDGs do you think would align most with your business purposes? You can choose any number. I'm recommending maybe 1 to 3. And I'll give you 5 minutes to think about that, and I'll go back to the previous slide. you very much, guys. So did anyone find this exercise useful, or does it feel a bit irrelevant? Useful? Okay, would anyone like to share their SDGs? Kate, you might need to run. I feel like it sounds like you're volunteering to share.
Oh. It just kicked in. I'm volunteering. Yeah, sure.
If you want to.
So for us is we are a music collective, music and art collective. So we pay a big attention to gender equality,
Okay.
because obviously in the music and art industry we don't have a lot of women. So we need to embrace music producers that are female, so creative directors, etc., etc. So we really strive to do that. So I think 5 is our number one. Good health and well-being, nothing more important than that to function in a passionate industry. 8, economic growth for sure, giving new money to independent artists and from underrepresented backgrounds, because obviously when you give money to underrepresented backgrounds, we also change society and we kind of restructure the hierarchy. I'm becoming blind. Innovation in the industry, that's another thing. We give people executive roles in our music collective, so we don't have middlemen running, we're DIY. So these are the main things.
Okay, perfect.
Yeah.
Great, thank you very much. Anyone from this table care to share? I did hear health being mentioned. Thanks, Jacqueline.
The 3 I picked was 3, good health and well-being, obviously in line with my business. All 3 were actually. I picked 6, clean water and sanitation. But even considering clean water, even to drink, even to wash yourself, and sanitation. And in my line of business, I need clean water to be able to make the products, and vice versa. And another one I find very high on my list within the business is number 12. So responsible consumption and production of materials. And it's been a lot in the news about rainforest and cutting down of trees and everything. And I find within my industry, we were very much the culprit of cutting down, making for packaging, making for bottles, and all those sort of things. But a lot more of us have become much more conscious-minded and wanting to do better.
Okay, that's really interesting. Great, thank you very much. So this, as I mentioned, one of the most recognized kind of frameworks for sustainable development, for social impact, and that could be something that you kind of use as a lens to showcase your business purpose through, if that was something you wanted to do. In terms of other frameworks, there's not a huge amount else that I would recommend, but I will flash up this, which is another UN program. This is called the UN Global Compact. This is much more business focused, although it has kind of been designed with big business in mind. They've got these kind of main principles here. The first one is about human rights, talks about labour standards. The environment is quite a key one, and then anti-corruption as well as a 10th goal. So this is something you can go and have a look at. It might not be quite as relevant for some of the small businesses that we've got here, but it is more business focused than the SDGs are. So this is also linked, so you can go back and have a look at that if that interests you. So I wanted to kind of flag what I think a good impact report should look like. It obviously shouldn't be 1 page long, but if it was, this is what a good one would look like. So this is, again, going on to that fictional example of there being an employment program in Brixton helping to get young people to get into work. So I've got some kind of headline statistics at the top here. This is just assuming that this program ran and it was a success, so I've just put some fluff numbers in here. So the data that I want people to go away with is that 83% of program participants were in full-time employment after 6 months. 91% of participants reported learning information beneficial to their job search in the program. So that's telling you about how many people are in jobs, and this is telling you like self-reported data on what people found helpful. And another important part of the program is that 27 local businesses have interviewed at least one participant for a relevant job vacancy. So this particular program is trying to approach it from both angles by working with local businesses as well as with young people, try to get them together. And these are kind of like the headlines that came out of that. Over here, we've got like a little bit of context data, so talking about current unemployment levels, and then saying in terms of numbers, the program itself supported 64 people into work, 36 of those were permanent, 13 have been temporary, 15 in part-time roles, kind of adding a little bit of detail to this statistic at the top here. Here I've got a little testimonial, so a particular participant reported kind of like a personal account of their program, and they're saying that they've increased in confidence, they learnt a lot of skills they didn't have before. And then here I've included a section on learnings. So through this program, what have we then generated as information that we would embed if we were to run the program again? So like the examples I've got here are to conduct mock interviews and to do regular knowledge tests with the people who are in the program, just to make sure we're progressing in the right way. And then there's a section here on methodology. So if you are to do an impact report, you should kind of say where the data has come from, how you've collected that data. So here I've just got as an example, biannual survey sent to attendees informed by informal feedbacks. That could just be casual chats or like interviews here and there. In-depth interviews with 15 participants in 2020. So that's kind of, this is like a best case scenario of what a very, very brief impact report could look like. I've also got an SDG there just to kind of, I guess, signal that this is the impact goal that we are striving towards in this program. And yeah, these kind of like the key sections. So this is more just kind of give an idea of what a good report could look like in terms of its key elements. Obviously, it's not going to be this short or on one page. But I guess the point of this is to say, if you could only pull out a few key statistics or a few key facts or pieces of data to hit your funders with or to hit your customers with, what would they be? And that can really help you to guide what kind of data you collect to show that the impact is happening in the way that you need to prove it. If that makes sense. Okay, so we've already touched on this a little bit, but I did want to reiterate the importance of defining success for good impact measurement. It's crucial to have a clear understanding of your impact goals. A theory of change is a really good start to teasing out the specific measurable impacts that you are working to achieve. Having a clear vision of what success looks like will mean that, as well as being more targeted in your activities, you're better able to hone in on the trackable metrics that will help you to understand whether those activities are resulting in the desired outcomes or not. So for example, if we consider an initiative to provide quality education to beneficiaries, if the overarching impact objective is to increase knowledge and awareness, the indicators will be things like a change in test scores and self-reported improved understanding. But if the impact objective is to improve employability prospects, the indicators will track the number of people in employment, the number of interviews secured, and things like that. So we can see how important it is to understand your impact objectives and specify the indicators that determine success. We've discussed a lot about best practice, but ultimately we need to ground theory in reality. The bottom line is that your impact measurement strategy will be limited by your resources. Small businesses typically have limited time and money at their disposal, and I'm quite keen for businesses to find a practical, happy medium when it comes to measuring their social impact and sustainability goals. Your impact measurement framework needs to be feasible, considering practical constraints such as time, money, availability of data, and weighing that up against the benefits of each particular method. When creating a strategy, you need to think about that balance between thoroughness and feasibility. Your impact goals may throw up some indicators that are difficult to capture or attribute to your specific intervention, but it's important to then prioritize which ones are worth taking that extra time to get the data for and which ones you perhaps could leave for future reference. But yeah, I think there's a lot of benefits to measuring your impact. And I think a really good way of approaching it is starting off with a solid strategy, going through that theory of change process, having your list of indicators, then picking the ones that are the most applicable for now, and having that list available for future for you to come back to if and when you need to add more color to the data that you're collecting. Yeah, because thoroughness is great, but we also need to actually like run our businesses and make sure that things are moving in the way they need to be moving. So it's all about balance. And that is the end of what I wanted to talk about today. So do we have any questions or just general comments at this point? Yeah?
You mentioned something earlier.
Can you wait for the mic? Sorry, Kate's running up.
You mentioned something earlier. Might be that I just missed it, but you mentioned DNIs.
Mhm.
What's that?
Oh, diversity and inclusion.
Okay,
Apologies. That's all I meant.
All right. Thank you.
If anyone has a question about their specific project that they would like to share, I can also chat about that. But if we have nothing more specific, I'm also happy to chat on a one-on-one basis too. Rachel has a question?
Do you have any, or can you point us in the direction for like templates for like sustainable policies or environmental policies that we can maybe, like templates that we can?
That is a good question.
adapt.
I don't think I have any to hand. I'm
I
sure
mean,
that...
yeah, not now. I don't mean like right now.
No, I'm sure I can definitely find something. And there are a few organisations that exist that do stuff like that. And I think you might be able to find things that are more relevant to the type of work that you actually do. Obviously, something that's like designed with a much more broad brush will not be relevant to a one-man band business. But yeah, we can definitely find something that is relevant. Yeah, Jacqueline's got one, and then I'll come to you.
Hi. You mentioned stakeholders further on, and I didn't quite get the gist of that. Who are they? Are they the suppliers or those who can help your business in achieving sustainability?
So I guess by stakeholders, when I was talking through the theory of change, you mean? So I think that it's more who is affected by that intervention, by that project, who cares about that project. So if it was the unemployability project in Brixton, it would be young unemployed people in Brixton. It would be like local businesses. It would be the local council, because they would all care about the outcome of that project. That might not all be directly affected by what we do in that project, but they'd all be interested and would care about it. So there'd be stakeholders, but to varying degrees, or have varying degrees of relation to the intervention itself. Does that make sense? So it's like selecting your stakeholders relevant to that project. To the front here.
Thank you. I was just thinking about with the part of the levels of outcome, and you said that there was like the further you get from basically like your product or your intervention, the more difficult it is to measure. I think for my publication, I'm just starting, which I spoke about earlier, and sort of seeing where how stories can have impact. Would you recommend, or would you know of any like kind of good ways in terms of like when it gets quite distant? Is it matter of partnering with certain people, or like how can I kind of find those ways basically?
Yeah, I think qualitative data is your friend there. So it's more if you can get those stories of people saying, as a result of me reading your publication, I met someone through it, and then we went off and started this project together, and having like those kind of case study approaches, because that is another way of collecting data that is really going to add color to that journey. Having qualitative data that really shows how that end goal impact connects to your intervention is harder, but it can still, in a big picture way, show some kind of progress. But I think you need both together to really be able to tell that story. So I would say if you have that qualitative data, that's really going to help you. And then also like doing regular check-ins with the same people, if that's something you're able to do. If you have like a mailing list of the people who are subscribed, and then you have some kind of reach out to them, it might not necessarily be a survey, or you can like trick them into a survey by doing something else. That could be a good way to like see the progression over time. Okay, I think we are done for today then. So thank you so much everyone for coming, really appreciate it. And it's been helpful. I did forget to mention that we'll send the slides to you. Kate will send the slides to you, and there's just a few links here for a few different topics if you are interested in some of these specific things that we've spoken about today. And I'll hand back over to Kate.